The Tigers have a new portal offensive line target. We'll tell you about him. It's Locked on LSU. Let's go.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We're free, available wherever you get podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. And as always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. So thank you for that. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed, win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. The LSU women's basketball team has a massive game on the road at Tennessee Thursday night. A little preview of that. The baseball Tigers have lost 2 transfers before the season starts. I want to tell you why. That's coming up here in just a smidge. But as the portal turns, another addition here. We've talked plenty about the LSU Tigers, who ESPN now ranks as the number 1 transfer portal class in the country with their 14 additions. But as you've heard us say, if you are an everydayer, and if you're an everydayer here on Locked on LSU, thank you so much for that. The Tigers are not done. They're at 14, but they're going to add more. We've let you hear it directly from Brian Kelly's mouth. They're going to end up around 15. They might even go over. They're looking for offensive line help. And the back end of the defense, meaning safety. And we have talked plenty about safety additions that LSU is targeting and has targeted and missed on. Zachariah Poyser from Jacksonville State. That was a miss. They were targeting one of the top safety portal transfers in the country out of Purdue. As much success as LSU has had in the portal, their inability to land an immediate impact safety is an illustration that you don't get everybody. So they continue to plug away. Now, I've told you here that LSU, is my understanding, LSU is a silent commit from an offensive tackle and a safety on teams currently playing in the college football playoff. Of course, Thursday is the Penn State Notre Dame game. Friday is Texas against Ohio State. So by the time Saturday comes, there will only be 2 teams left in college football. Perhaps those players that LSU has these silent commits with will be done by this weekend, and maybe we'll have that answer, or maybe not. And Brian Kelly even said on that Saturday press conference before the bowl game, before Christmas, he said, this may take a while. And there's teams still playing, and you get the 5-day portal window. I mean, he told you to be patient. Essentially, what was coming. So every time there's a notable safety or a notable offensive lineman in the transfer portal, we're going to talk about it. Our previous episode, we talked about Tamarcus Cooley. I'm going to get to the offensive line here in a second. But in our previous episode, we talked about Tamarcus Cooley. Tamarcus Cooley is a safety from NC State. He visited Ole Miss on Wednesday, and he arrived in Baton Rouge on Thursday. That's amazing news. The LSU hasn't gotten a commitment from him, but it's amazing news because just like in NFL free agency, the objective as the team is when you get a free agent on a visit, you never want to let them leave. You want to make sure that while they're on their visit, you seal the deal, you get them signed. So the fact that he visited Ole Miss and still visited LSU is a great sign for the Tigers. Now let's see if LSU can land him. So that's one possibility there with Tamarcus Cooley. As we look at the offensive line, LSU's already added 2. Braylon Moore, the center from Virginia Tech. Josh Thompson, the offensive lineman from Northwestern, who has started at both offensive tackle and guard on the right side of the line. He's played both right tackle and right guard. He could play either at LSU. But the ideal situation is for Thompson to play guard and LSU bring in a tackle out of the transfer portal. Well, there were 2 more tackles, elite level tackles, that entered the transfer portal on Wednesday. One of them who has 5 years of Power 5 experience, who's going to play a 6th season, and the other who is a 2-year starter at the FCS level. And oddly enough, the FCS transfer is the one that's more desirable. I'll tell you about him in a second. Monroe Mills is the player from Louisville. So Monroe Mills started his career as a class of 2020 signee, and he went to Oklahoma State. And he played one game in 2020, one game in 2021, and then transferred to Texas Tech, where he spent 2 seasons with the Red Raiders. He played 9 games in 2022 and then 11 games in 2023. Then here in 2024, he transferred to Louisville, his third school, and he played 11 games. Actually played both right tackle and left tackle. 260 snaps at left tackle, 306 snaps at right. So he played both sides. But my understanding is LSU is not interested in Monroe Mills. They are, however, interested in Connor Moore. Connor Moore is the offensive lineman from Montana State who earlier this week played in the FCS National Championship game and, of course, lost, as we saw, to North Dakota State. Connor Moore is interesting because of the path he's taken, but he is a quintessential example of why the transfer portal actually works. It works for guys like this because Connor Moore was a no-star coming out of Northeast Ohio as a high school player, and he ends up at the FCS level. He was about 270 pounds, 6'5". Well, since the time he finished his high school career, now 3 years at Montana State, he's up to 6'5", 310. And boy, he's played a lot. So as a freshman in 2022, Connor Moore played in just 3 games, so he redshirted, but then came back as a redshirt freshman in 2023, played all 12 games at left tackle, and was a freshman All American at the FCS level. So he had a giant leap year 1 to year 2. In 2024, year 3, he started the first 3 games at left guard and then moved back to left tackle, where he started the next 9 games. And he was a first-team all-conference performer for Montana State, as we mentioned, played for the FCS National Championship. In total, he played 932 offensive snaps. 932 offensive snaps in one season is pretty incredible. Just as a, for instance, here, I'll run through LSU starting offensive linemen. Will Campbell played 866, so just by comparison, Miles Frazier played 902. Of course, Miles Frazier played in the bowl game. I'm looking for Emory Jones here. Emory Jones played in 864 snaps. DJ Chester, who started every game at center, played 925. So you can tell this is a guy that played every snap for Montana State this year. 932 offensive snaps for Montana State in this season. And when you look at his PFF grades, which, listen, when we're talking about skill guys, we can always talk about catches or rushing yards or even defensive players, talk about tackles or interceptions, pass breakups. There aren't statistics to talk about with offensive linemen. But in 12 games, starting all 12, his overall offensive grade was a 76.7. His pass blocking grade was a 69.7. His run blocking grade was a 77. And on the season, committed just 4 penalties in a dozen games. If you want a little perspective on the grades there for the season, Miles Frazier was your highest grade pass blocking offensive lineman at 89.6. As far as run blocking, Kyle, your highest graded offensive lineman was Garrett Dellinger at 69.3. Your highest graded run blocking offensive lineman was Garrett Dellinger at 69.3. Remember, I told you that Moore, his run blocking grade was a 77. Now, I get it. It's at the FCS level, but still. And if you're looking at your overall top offensive grade from an offensive lineman, it was Garrett Dellinger at 73.5. Moore's overall grade was a 76.7. So he would have been your highest graded offensive lineman and highest graded run blocking offensive lineman. I get it. FCS, not the SEC. But a lot of times I also like to point out that when we're talking about players like this, sometimes in recruiting, when you don't know a lot about a player, I care far less about a star ranking, and I care more so about who is recruiting you. If you look at a player in their recruiting ranking and they're a low 4-star, whatever, or a high 3-star. But they've got offers from Alabama and LSU and Oklahoma and Ohio State and Southern Cal. That's very telling to me. If all at Georgia, like if all those programs want you, all those great programs who are really good at evaluating talent can't be wrong. So right now, remember, there's a kid from Northeast Ohio, and he's got 4 teams sort of on his short list as of right now. Ohio State, that should come as no surprise, trying to get him home. Oklahoma in the SEC, who just put out a terrible offensive line this past year, and they are looking for answers. Michigan, who's replacing their starting left tackle and their starting left guard this season. And then Cincinnati, another team there in his home state of Ohio. So would he want to maybe play at obviously Cincinnati's now a Power 5 school or a Power 4 school, but would he rather play at a bigger time school? As I understand it, LSU is trying to get Connor Moore to Baton Rouge for a visit. So that's the first step. And a lot of times maybe these guys have ideas of where they'd like to go. And, sometimes there's an early lead, but it's your job to get them to campus so you can recruit them. But what I will say is the clock's ticking because remember, guys, if they want to go through spring practice, they got to be enrolled for the spring semester, and there's a cutoff date for that in January. So it's one of those things where this recruitment process is going to have to go pretty quickly for a guy if he is planning on being on someone else's campus for spring semester to be able to go through spring football. So we told you about Tamarcus Cooley, the safety from NC State, who is visiting LSU got to LSU on Wednesday and was here for his visit on Thursday. And then Connor Moore, the offensive lineman from Montana State, is the other worth keeping an eye on right now that LSU's targeting. And as we've mentioned, been told that the Tigers do have silent commits at offensive tackle and safety on teams in the college football playoff. But again, it's never a guarantee. It's just never a guarantee that gets done until it's done. So the Tigers are right to cover all their bases and make sure that they don't allow a good prospect to land somewhere else and they get left holding the bag. So Tigers are doing their due diligence, looking at an offensive tackle and a safety. Those are a couple new names to keep an eye on. The baseball Tigers, just a little more than a month away from starting a new baseball season. 2 players have left the program. We'll tell you why next. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find subscriptions that you forgot about, or maybe that you were paying for twice? That has happened to millions of people. You have a few subscriptions, you didn't realize you were still paying for them. Rocket Money makes it so easy to track them down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions. It monitors your spending. It helps you lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals that you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users that have saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions. Reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Baseball Tigers will throw out the first pitch, year 4 under Jay Johnson, on Valentine's Day, February the 14th. And they are now within roster compliance. So 2 players have transferred out of the LSU baseball roster to get LSU to the roster limit number of 40. Those 2 players are Trenton Lape and Trevor Schmidt. I'm going to tell you a little bit about each of them. But remember, rosters were allowed to swell with COVID. And then obviously players were able to get that extra eligibility because the baseball season was canceled amid COVID. So for the last half decade or so, we've lived in this college baseball world with inflated roster numbers. And in 2025, the roster limits for baseball, the number is 40. And next year that goes down to 34. So we start to get back in line with what's normal. But it's 40 this year in 2025. And coming out of fall ball, LSU is at 43. So they had to trim the roster a bit. Well, one player is Devin Sheeran, the big right-handed pitcher from Mount St. Mary's, those 100. He tore his ACL over the summer in a non-baseball accident, and he is redshirting this year. So he will not count against the number in 2025. So you had 2 spots. You were 2 spots heavy, and that's where Trenton Lape and Trevor Schmidt are now leaving, and they will both go play at the junior college ranks in 2025. Lape, I'll start there. Lape signed with LSU in the 2023 class as the number 3 player in Louisiana. He was number 132 overall. And he redshirted last season. And so he'll head to the junior college levels. He's going to Chipola College to play here in the 2025 season. There's no reason that he one day couldn't make his way back to LSU after going the JUCO ranks, but Tigers had to get their numbers within compliance, and so you looked at where you were heavy. So Lape is one. The other is a little more interesting. It's Trevor Schmidt. So if you're not familiar with Trevor Schmidt, this is a baseball ghost that Jay Johnson has chased for some time. So Trevor Schmidt is a power hitting first baseman who signed with Jay Johnson in 2022, but never got to play for Jay Johnson. He signed with Jay Johnson, and then Jay took the LSU job. Well, after playing for a year at Arizona, he transferred to Fullerton College, not Cal State Fullerton, Fullerton College, where he played for a couple of seasons. He was a power hitting corner infielder. Last season, he hit .345 with 12 homers in just 27 games. Remember, that's about half a season. So he had a dozen homers in just 27 games. You had to replace power in this lineup. Of course, you got Bear Jones back, but you lost a bunch, including Tommy White, Hayden Travinski. You had to go add some power bats in this lineup. And so Schmidt was one of those guys who was thought to be ready-made, plug-and-play first baseman, a power-hitting first baseman, when Bear Jones went to the draft. Well, Bear Jones elected to come back to LSU. So Bear Jones was a draft-eligible sophomore, but elected to return for his junior season. So he maintains his leverage, can go into the draft next year, and maybe make himself even a little more money. I don't know how possible that really is, because Bear Jones is never going to become a dominant defender or develop other tools. He's not going to develop the glove or the speed or anything like that. He's a power hitting first baseman. And so there's a cap, a ceiling for a power hitting first baseman. I mean, it's what you do. You stand on first base, you catch a ball, you slug homers. And there's a role for guys like that in baseball, but that's not a 5-tool guy like Dylan Cruz that's going to go in the top 10 picks. So maybe it's one of those where NIL certainly benefited LSU in getting Bear Jones back, but it hurts a guy like Trevor Schmidt, who ultimately decides now to go into the portal, to go back to Fullerton College from whence he came, where he'll have an opportunity to play. It's one of those where you hate to lose a guy like that who can be a valuable depth piece and an option if something else around doesn't work out. But if you look at your infield, Bear Jones is going to play first base. Danny Dickinson is going to play second. And the left side of your infield is going to be Michael Braswell and Stephen Milam. One at short, one at third. We'll see how that all works itself out. And even in the outfield where Schmidt had played a little bit, I mean, you got Jake Brown returning. You got Ashton Larson, who obviously was incredible. You got Pearson back. You went and got Derek Curiel, who's one of the top players in the country, who showed up on campus. I mean, you are loaded with talent all over this field, all over the field, with one of the top combined high school signing and portal class in the country. So Schmidt was probably one of those guys who's a veteran looking around going, man, it's my 4th year. I don't know if I'm going to even see the field. So probably a wise decision to go somewhere that he's going to be able to play. Both guys, Lape and Schmidt, were with LSU in fall ball. But here, as LSU had to get within the numbers, those two guys will head elsewhere here for 2025. The Tigers, meanwhile, will begin practice here later in January and get ready for their season opener against Purdue Fort Wayne coming up on Valentine's Day on February the 14th. So we'll celebrate Valentine's Day out at the box. All right, it is Locked on LSU. We're glad to have you hanging out with us here. One quick break, come back, give you a thumbnail preview of LSU women's basketball against Tennessee. It is the first real big road test for Kim Mulkey's squad. We'll tell you what you need to know as we wrap up next here, Locked on LSU, your team every day. So number 6 LSU, who's undefeated, only a handful of undefeated teams remaining in women's college basketball, hits the road to take on their first ranked road opponent of the season, the Tennessee Volunteers, who suffered their first loss of the season this past weekend. Tennessee lost Sunday at home, incidentally, against 9th-ranked Oklahoma. Tennessee trailed by 16 going into the fourth quarter, nearly rallied, but ended up losing by just 1 point. LSU, meanwhile, owns the nation's longest win streak as LSU is 17-0. A couple of things to keep an eye on in this game. There's some individual history that could happen. So Anissa Morrow is 14 points away from her 2,500th career point, and she's 33 rebounds away. And I don't think she's going to get 33 rebounds in this game, but she's a double-double machine. She's 33 rebounds away from 1,500 in her career. In the history of women's college basketball in Division I, only 6 players in the history of the game have scored 2,500 points and accumulated 1,500 rebounds. Anissa Morrow, sometime over the next couple of games, will become the 7th player in the history of women's college basketball to do that, which is pretty awesome. So Tennessee, the Lady Vols, they're in their first season under Kim Caldwell, and they are a fast-paced team. This is going to be a frenetic-paced game. They lead the country at 97 points per game, but LSU is third nationally at 91.7 points per game. So they're both teams that get up and down and can score. Tennessee leads the country in offensive rebounds, and also they run a breakneck pace. It's almost like 40 minutes of hell. They lead the country forcing 27 turnovers per game. Let me say that again. Tennessee leads the country at forcing 27 turnovers a game. They are plus 12 on average in the turnover margin. That's number 2 in the country. So Tennessee can score, and my goodness, will they turn you over because of their ability to press. But the thing that kind of plays in LSU's favor is LSU is a dramatically better defensive team than Tennessee. LSU holds opponents to 33% from the field. That's best in the SEC. Tennessee is dead last in the SEC in field goal defense at 44%. This is a Tennessee team that is going to press and try to turn you over, and they're going to shoot a ton of threes. As a matter of fact, they make 12 threes per game. That's the best in the country, and they lead the country with 37 three-point attempts per game. So just understand what this is going to be. Tennessee is going to press, and they are going to shoot a ton of threes. LSU can score the basketball, and they are a much better defensive team than Tennessee. But this is LSU's first true road test. They played road games, but this is the first road test against a ranked opponent all season. And we'll find out if LSU really is worthy of that number 6 ranking right now. I understand Thursday is the Orange Bowl with Penn State, Notre Dame, and a lot of people are going to be locked into that. I know I will be. Because of that game, the LSU-Tennessee game will only be on SEC Network Plus. So streaming only, no linear television option for LSU and Tennessee. But we'll keep an eye on it. It's a big one for Kim Mulkey and the squad heading up to Rocky Top on Thursday. Okay, that'll do it for us here on today's episode of Locked On LSU. Thanks for making us your first listen. Now for your second listen, go check out my guy, Chris Gordy, over at Locked On SEC, LSU Tiger. Hey, if you are listening on your favorite podcast app, Thank you so much. Please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video. And let a friend know if they love the Tigers. We got you here every single day for Locked on LSU, your team every day.